So, good morning, everyone. We're having some technical difficulties. So, one of those fun things that happens here on the internet. So, if you can hear both of us, then please give us a thumbs up or something in the comments that lets us know that you can hear us. But, Jerry, give everyone a shout out and see if they can hear you.
Thank you, Corey, for having me on. Again, as Corey is saying, she's having trouble hearing me. So if you could just give us a heads up in the comments that you can hear us both, then we'll start rocking and rolling.
Well, fantastic. Well, I just want to remind everyone that we're here for the case study. And the purpose of this show is really just to be able to give people an understanding of the things that happen on our construction projects that really more often than not are repeated on project after project after project that we go on. And so what we want to be able to do is try to come up with some resolution on some of these things or find ways that we can prevent this same problem from occurring. And today's guest is Jerry Aliberti, and he is the founder and owner of Pro Excel, which is an executive consultation company who's going to help you be able to find all of the things going on in your company that aren't allowing it to run as smoothly, maybe as you would like it to. And I have leaned on him a number of different times and find him to be an absolute resource. So if you haven't reached out and talked to Jerry yet, you need to. But at least follow him and his posts. I keep harassing him about developing a little book that puts all of his lessons learned together because he is just such a wealth of knowledge. So, Jerry, again, thank you so much for being here. We're really going to have a nice talk and learn a lot from you. But before we do that, can you just tell everybody a little bit about yourself and what it is that you've got going on?
Sure. Thank you, Corey, again for having me on this. You've always been a great support for me, and we've known each other now for a couple of years, so that's great. So a little bit about me. I've been in the construction market for over 22 years. I always knew I was going to get into construction as a kid. You know, when I was a kid, I would watch cartoons and I would watch Home Again with Bob Vila. You know, it was something that. It was a path that I always knew I was going to take. So I've been in the New York City construction market 19 years of those 22 years working for self-performed GCs. It was mainly the heavy civil and then transitioned into commercial as well. I ran over several $100 million of my own work, running my own crews, my own subs, in addition to being a part of several $100 million more. And I was privileged enough to also run my own estimating teams and projects. I've estimated over $12 billion worth of work. My single largest project was about a $1.5 billion project right in the heart of COVID. So that was certainly a challenge as well. I've always been a part of strategic development. I've always been a part of taking initiatives and within the organization. So taking the executive coaching consulting path was a very natural path for me. And the past couple of years, I started Pro Excel, and I've been helping contractors nationwide, helping them build and grow their businesses as well.
Well, fantastic. Thank you for that rundown. And just give us maybe a little bit of a taste of what it is that you're going to talk about. What is one of the challenges that drives you crazy when you walk into a company?
Right. So, I mean, basically, a lot of contractors, they're either starting the company from the ground up and they were an operator and within the business, they were a PM, they were an estimator, whatever it may be. And, those first couple of years getting to that 10 to 20 to $30 million, it's a very steep uphill battle. You are the business, you're everything, right? And then you're hiring your first couple of hires and they're all wearing any hat that's required to wear in order to build that business. And then you get to a point where you're at that 20, 30, 40, maybe $50 million, whether you're a GC or a specialty subcontractor. And you're realizing, well, I'm working so much harder. My business is that much larger, but I'm making just as much money, if not less. But the stress is more, and it's having an impact at home as well. And that's where companies start to say, you know what, it's time to bring somebody in to kind of help us out, and that's typically the stage where I get in. Or if they're even much larger, they have all the, they have a sloppy, as you wrote in the LinkedIn post, an org chart that's like one big spaghetti run. Nobody really understands who's answering to who. They were so busy building this big organization, and next thing you know, they have all these different people who just don't. There's a power struggle, let's say, right? And nobody really knows who the real leaders are within the organization. And owners tend to breathe in their own exhaust day in and day out, and that's where a consultant or an executive coach comes in. You bring in that breath of fresh air.
Okay, well, let's walk it back just a little bit so that we can have an understanding, because I think a lot of business owners are going to really resonate with you on this and how this is happening. So in my experience, what I see is that somebody's really good out in the field and they're kicking ass. They're the best superintendent for concrete, or they're the guy that's running the erection crew. And so now they're going to start their own company. And it's usually because maybe the client really also saw something special in them and thought, why am I using this contractor and paying all this overhead? I'm just going to go straight to the guy that's building it for me, and I'm going to give them this opportunity. So the entrepreneur steps out of an unfamiliar box of being able to create productivity and getting things done. And then they move into this now business and having to do administration and having to do invoicing and like you're talking about, forecasting and understanding how to scale your business. And so, maybe they bring along a couple buddies who they worked really well with out in the field. But then our skill sets that we use out in the field, although that experience is critical, those skill sets are very different than what we need when we move into an office situation. So can you speak to that? Because I think that if we find the root cause, that we're going to be able to help them prepare better before they step into that entrepreneurship opportunity, so they can kind of have things set up to start rolling the way that they need to when they start their business.
Well, first thing, you need to have your personal life in order as well. Right? I mean, if you got rocky relationships, starting a business is going to add a lot of stress to that. So you need to have honest conversations with the people that you love, that you're the closest with, whether you're in a marriage or in a relationship. And if you have kids, I started my business at 40 years old. My kids were just about becoming teenagers at that point. And you got to understand something, that to me, in order to catapult forward, you got to kind of take a couple of steps back. So get your personal life in order and let people know that, you're going to be, you're going to be tight with cash for a little while as well. And that's important. Now, as far as the business aspect goes, is, you got to be able to handle a lot of stress, right? You got to have a sense of urgency, as you need to have, and within being a project manager, or a salary position with an organization, you really got to have a sense of urgency. Also, and a business ownership. I typically help contractors on the operation. So it's how do you win your work, which is marketing and business development. It's how do you bid your work, estimating, and how do you execute your work, right? But it all starts with how do you win your work, right? So you got to be good with building relationships and networking. You got to be that type of personality who's going to be out there and shake hands, and you got to find the time to do that. A lot of contractors, they're so stuck in the field, no one's really focusing on how to win work, and then how to get work, how to find work, and then how to bid the work as well. They're all focused on the field and pushing projects.
Well, I mean, let's be fair. We're going to focus on what's comfortable and what we're familiar with, right? So, I mean, a lot of that is going to mean that we're falling back into old habits of being more of a superintendent mind instead of an executive professional mind.
Right. And you got to be comfortable with everything. So, if you want to become an owner, you got to be comfortable with everything. You got to be able to build relationships. You got to know how to estimate bids. You got to feel comfortable with those numbers going in, because once they go in and you get awarded that project, you're writing the check as an owner. Right. And then once that gets out to the field, if that's your comfort zone, then from there, you know, you have a little bit more comfort with that. But a lot of owners don't really know how to estimate. And a lot of owners who are in estimating don't really know how to execute projects as well. And that's why your first couple of hires, which goes into the next segment, your first couple of hires are going to be the most imperative, the most critical hires you're going to have ever in your business, because they're going to be the ones who are going to take you to the next level. I just spoke to a contractor not too long ago who went from a couple of million to $300 million and within under 10 years. And he said, Jerry, it was my first couple of hires. I hired a phenomenal estimator. I hired a phenomenal project manager. And then those two individuals helped me get to the next level, and they're still with me today.
Yeah, and I mean, that's so important because a lot of times when we're starting a company, first off, we want to keep really tight control, right? Because we only have so much money. We don't have a whole lot of cash flow that's going to be banking us while we're figuring out some of these mistakes. And then secondly, is that we need to find people who are better at certain lanes that we're not. And so sometimes it's really scary hiring someone who's better at you at something when you're not really familiar with that lane to begin with.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you always got to hire somebody who can bring something else to the table rather than yourself. There are some of the more seasoned, older school individuals who just want to be the best in the organization. It's like, well, why do you want to be the best? I mean, when I look to hire somebody, I want you to bring something else to the table that I don't know about. It just makes my life a lot easier. It's always the case. It should always be the case.
Right. And I can imagine that one of those first sticking points is the salary of that first person. Are there things that as an executive coach that you see and suggest for owners to be able to negotiate things like, I don't know, percentage of the company, or as we grow, you get compensation in what are some ways that an entrepreneur who's starting early out can grab some of these really high potential employees, but you don't necessarily have the money to do that?
This really depends on the individual and their cash flow and what money they have going into the business. I mean, listen, I know quite a few people who had investors pretty much putting a couple $1 million in the bank to get them going, and they were able to hire aces right off right out the door. That's not typically the situation. So I don't think you'll ever be able to hire someone just getting going. That's going to be an ace for you. It's going to be someone who will be okay with that lower salary. Promising them that you're going to give them a piece of the company right out the door is risky business to me. That's probably more when you're a mid-sized company as well, or even making those promises. I also find that when you make those promises, a lot of the time you're not able to keep those promises. When you're just getting going, you have this high sense of motivation, and I'm going to knock this out of the park. I can do it. But let's face the facts. 90% of companies in the first 5 years fail. Those are facts. It's all over the internet, So to make promises that you can't keep is risky. So you got to find the balance, what you're comfortable with. You got to make those hires, the hires that are going to fill the gaps that are your weaknesses, right? And go off of that.
Yeah. So now that we have hired the right person, what about collaboration with other team members and trying to make sure that we leave that lane open for that person to be able to perform at their highest efficiency, but still be able to bring the rest of the team along with them?
Are you talking like on the leadership level? Is as that person is growing with you, you're hiring more people and that person becomes more of a leader? Is that
absolutely? So if we're scaling our business and we're making that first decision of really hiring that key personnel, how do I now make them all mesh in order to keep my company running smoothly? Because again, I'm focused on the production. I need to get shit done out there and make sure I keep the money rolling in so that I can pay all these big high money salary guys I just hired.
Well, this is where building out a proper org chart and really differentiating roles and responsibilities and knowing the outcomes, very important. Everyone needs to know the outcomes that they're responsible to day in and day out that makes both themselves successful, but also your business successful as well. And they need to be held accountable. And there's certain ways you could hold those people accountable as well without, putting them in the spotlight and making them feel down on themselves as well. So it's building out that org chart and then understanding all the different roles and knowing who needs to collaborate and communicate with who. Everyone thinks an org chart is about who's the boss of who. No, it's who to communicate with who collaborates with who, and what outcomes each and every person is responsible for, and understanding that at some point there's a threshold where a particular individual can't be the super, the PM, and the estimator anymore. The PM needs to become the PM. The super needs to become the super. The estimator needs to become the estimator. And when you have that level of overhead in your business, you need to keep estimating. You need to keep building your backlog.
So, I mean, I definitely hear what you're saying, but I also feel that sometimes when our focus is just on the C-suite or just on some of the upper management, we miss an opportunity to find some key players that are going to help us build some of that. And so as I'm hearing you, it reminds me of something that I've been pushing lately. And that is like someone called an innovative specialist, who is a data analysis, but also someone who is able to build criteria and be able to analyze information coming in order to be able to have very clear outputs, so that people know how to measure what it is that they're doing or measure their accomplishments.
So that's, to me, that's essentially understanding your KPIs, right? And then just being clear on what KPIs are for each individual. I mean, most people talk about KPIs, but they don't really track anything, right? So, I mean, if you're a labor intensive contractor, probably the most important KPI is your labor cost tracking, which so many don't do. And I have so many reasons why, even with those that try it fails as well. But each position needs to have some kind of a level of measurement to know if they're winning or not. And that's important. And now with AI, there's so many different things that you could be doing, and just run it through AI.
Yeah. Are you telling me I need to go buy a new software? Because
No, it's just AI is moving so fast, and there's so many cool things that I've been helping clients where, like, hey, just put this. Well, how do I get this, and how do I gather all this information and make sense of it? Hello, use AI. Ask it that question, and it'll tell you exactly what it can and what it can't do for you. It's you got to be. I mean, I use it every day, both in my business and my personal life.
Yeah.
It's become my therapist.
Yeah. So I know one of the things that I hear a lot is when a business owner is building their business or looking at scaling, we often say you need to stop working in your business and start working on your business. So what does that mean when you're helping a client really understanding the metrics and that data that's coming in and really producing those predictable outcomes? How do you help them make that transition?
Right. So one of the first things I do is I ask, what do you do every day, all day long? And I'll tell you this, Corey, if they're a $50 million a year, $100 million a year contractor, so many of them are dealing with the day-to-day grind and the redundancy and the fire drills. And then, I asked them why, and then I asked them, and I keep digging into each of those particular areas, and it all boils down to people just not really knowing. One, it's them just being a micromanager and not being able to let go of the business, and I get that. It's an emotional side of that where you really need to. I mean, I was never the greatest delegator myself, so I really get that. There's that mindset. It's easier if I do it myself. but you become the bottleneck, right? So it's just really understanding what you're doing every day, and knowing what you should be doing and how that looks, and getting clear on the outcome of, hey, if I can get you from doing this every day, which is working in the grind, to doing this every day, this is how your business is going to look. Do you understand that? Do you see that through these bite-sized tasks that we're going to do together, where this business is going to look in well, not really 6 months, but 12 months and beyond? And then at that point, I think they start to grasp the big picture of really knowing that they got to, they got to start taking those steps, because a lot of them, it's their relationships at home are suffering as well.
So we really want to make sure that we are pulling that low fruit, the low value tasks that are important, but they take up a lot of time, and they probably could be done by someone else, and that the summary of it is all we need to be able to do our own job when we're in a C-suite situation.
Oh yeah. Can you just repeat that last thing? I'm sorry, Corey.
What was that?
Can you just repeat the last thing? What was the question? Can you just repeat the question?
Yeah, just understanding that when we're trying to scale our business, it doesn't happen overnight. There are small steps that we're going to be taking. And one of the first steps that we can take is really getting rid of that low value tasks that are repeatable, that we can systemize and maybe hand off to someone else, so that they're not draining our time.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, how many of us, all of us are guilty of having these big dreams and wanting to do big things. And then you start diving into the operation, and you're grabbing on all to the long-term goals, and then you lose interest of it, right? So you gotta know what your long-term goals are, but what in the short term, what in the interim can we start doing now, where you as the owner, and also the people that work for you, are starting to see that, hey, things are getting a little bit better by accomplishing, A, B, C first. And then as we're accomplishing that, we're still working on the long-term goals. So it really is important to understand what the low-hanging fruit is, just so everybody can start seeing what winning looks like in this new strategy, this new planning phase.
Yeah. So this is one of the reasons why we're able to get along, because we don't really compete against each other. We compete with each other. So I give executive coursework for people to learn how to do these things, but you really are the person who steps in and helps them, well, basically holds their hand through that type of high pressure situation where they don't have time to really learn it. They just need to have somebody come in and help them clean up what needs to get done, so they can get on the right track and build a good foundation. But what I have been learning in some of the prep work and research that I've been doing for the executive professional, which is the 12-week course that I've put together, is that there's these like micro meetings that are suggested with your top personnel in order to be able to really understand everyone's on the same page. And I know that sometimes in construction, we don't get the micro meeting. We get the long version of generational storytelling in about an hour and a half meeting that has an agenda that's been laid out, and everybody wants to have their 20 minutes of input of why things aren't going right, but don't necessarily come in with the resolution or problem. So as a successful executive coach, what would you tell your clients in being able to really streamline their communication, which probably is one of the most important skills that they have as a leader of their company?
There hasn't been a single company that I have talked where I talked to the individuals and within the organization, the companies that are not doing so well, that people have complained where there's not a proper amount of collaboration. People just don't understand what's happening on other jobs. They're getting labor reports from them randomly at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, or they're getting that call at 6:30 in the morning, and to the core of any operating system, whether it's EOS or any other operating system, you got to have certain structured meetings. The reason why these meetings are botched almost all the time is because there's no set, proper, structured agenda with a real process. Like, for example, I always promote project specific meetings, which is run by the PM of that project. There's a set agenda where there's a certain amount of people that come to that meeting with certain outcomes for each of those bullet points, and they need to speak to those outcomes. And those outcomes need to be clear that that's part of their roles and their responsibilities. And if those outcomes aren't met, they're not going to come to that meeting with excuses. They're just not going to show up with those excuses. And they have a certain amount of time to talk to those outcomes. And if those outcomes aren't being met as a community, as a team, well, what needs to happen to meet those outcomes for the next meeting? And now you're left. Now you leave that meeting and you have that responsibility in addition to the additional outcome for that next meeting. So each task needs to be tied to a certain role, and each role needs to know what the outcomes are for those meetings. And you can't show up saying, I didn't have time, because then you're going to be building a culture of, okay, he didn't have time or she didn't have time to do it. And that's the owner who needs to step in and say that that's unacceptable. And the PM needs to lead it. So someone needs to lead it. I love calling people a certain champion, right? So who's the champion of every process? Every one of your SOPs, every one of your meetings, everything that you do that moves the company forward needs to have a champion to it. So they are held accountable if the people that are showing up to that process, that task, are not delivering.
Yeah, I like that because, construction's already hard enough and we're competitive people. And so when you use a word like champion, we know that we're the king of the mountain in the moment. And having accountability is really, really important. And so when we're recognizing that as an owner, I think what I'm hearing you say is that owner's position really changes in mindset from being a production thinking and planning into a more strategic and forecasting view that they're trying to take on.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, at some point as an owner, you need to be worrying about building relationships, right? There's the infamous go on the golf course. I mean, that should be your right to go on a golf course and build those relationships, or go to the local ABC meeting or whatever it may be, and then to build that backlog. I mean, I always feel that ownership put their eyes on estimates, because at the end of the day, they're writing that check, right? As you're growing and as you start entering the $50 to $100 million zone, you should have that CEO, COO who's in charge of your operations, the CFO at some point, or a fractional CFO. And each of those individuals need to be empowered to also be watching all the people that they're, well, not watching, but supervising, leading, let's say, it's probably a better word, leading those people that are under them on the org chart, It's also important. I just want to add one thing, because this is a big thing. It's, if your foreman is bypassing the super, bypassing the PM, bypassing the construction operation, or your ops manager, whoever you call it, and coming directly to you, and you empower them to do that, and you answer that question, you're building a culture that you don't respect the leaders that you put into place under you, and that's terrible. You build culture by each and every one of the conversations you're having with your people. You don't build culture by pizza parties and great Christmas parties. You build culture by the conversations you're having and empowering your leaders to be the leaders. And as long as they know what the outcomes and their expectations are, they should be able to answer all those questions and make those decisions.
So I can appreciate that from the reflection of an executive C-suite professional, but let me be the superintendent for a second. This bottleneck in between me and the president of the company is not letting me get my job done out on the job site. They don't understand what the hell's going on out here. And if I don't get somebody to help put some pressure on this guy that's in the middle, I'm not going to be able to be accountable and make my deadlines and my budgets. So what does that superintendent do in order to be part of the collaborative of the team to help things run smoothly? Because you and I have spent a lot of time talking about what happens on the office end, but it really is all connected. You know, you don't want the dog wagging the tail. So what's that superintendent supposed to do?
Yeah, and I'll be honest, I've been in that situation myself. So unfortunately, the way for the company not to get into that position is by putting the right people in the right roles, not because you're comfortable with them, because they're your childhood friend, or because you work with them on a different company. Okay. You got to put the right people in the right roles, and you got to understand that, as I was always told, the higher up the ladder you go, it doesn't mean that you have less people. It doesn't mean that you have less bosses. It means you have more, really, because you're leading more people who are relying on you to make great decisions, because it has an impact on their careers. But this is also why company-wide meetings should also be implemented. Reviews should also be implemented. It's not to finger point and to throw other people under the bus. It's more to be in a collaboration. Hey, you're not advancing as much as I would like for you to advance. Why is that? Well, it's because this becomes the bottleneck. Well, why is that becoming the bottleneck? Is because this individual is not making the right decisions at the right time, who typically is their supervisor as well. There's a lot of friction between supers and PMs as well, Corey, because the supers typically are the more seasoned individuals who can build the job. And and people think that because the super needs to respond to the PM, because the PM responds to the owner, that the super becomes the boss of the PM, and that's not the case.
Right.
It's collaboration. It's respecting each other's roles. Mm-hmm. So when I position it that way, it sparks a little bit of a different idea and a perspective. Like, you know what? Even though this PM is less seasoned than I, they're better with paperwork. They choose that path of, for their own personal reasons. It's not because they know less than me. It's not because they know more than me. It's just because that's the path that they chose. Let me respect that individual as well. Right. But it's not, it's disrespectful for the super to bypass the PM to go to a different level and within the organization as well. And if that person who's higher than them is accepting that, well, you got a problem on your hands.
I think that's a really important point to exemplify, because I think a lot of times that the culture of the construction industry just has us believing that in order to move up the ladder means that we're moving into one of those different management roles, when really the new role, as I see it, of superintendents is the PM of the job site. I mean, they're the one who's managing subcontractors, excuse me, managing scope of work. And like you said, the project manager is going to be doing the administration of all of that and the facilitation of information to the owner. Yeah, and so recognizing that you can move up higher at the level that you're at. So if you're a superintendent, there's a senior superintendent role, but it's never called senior superintendent. Usually once you hit superintendent, you're the God knowledge of all construction on the face of the earth on your construction site. So it's just
picture it this way, picture a highway, and every mile there's a traffic light. The PM's job is to keep those traffic lights green so the super and the foreman can just blast right through. Right. So the PM is dealing more and now we're talking about larger scale projects. The PM is more in charge of client relations and scheduling and being the sole person who understands the financials of the business, of the project, and the labor, the submittals, and the paperwork behind that. The super's more in the trenches with the foreman and making sure that the materials are being delivered and everything is running smoothly and safely, of course, right? Safety goes without saying.
And some people, their skill sets are just more tactical, right? I mean, so maybe they're never going to like being in an executive C role position. And so sometimes I feel that companies need to recognize that promotion doesn't mean becoming vice president or operations. It could mean that, that superintendent is going to be the senior superintendent of all superintendents and is there to be able to help things run smoothly that way, using the skill sets that they've been working on for the last 30 years. Because literally, if you've been working in that skill set of being tactical for 20, 30 years, and now you're moving to a strategic skill set in the administration of a company, it's almost like starting from scratch, but with a whole lot of experience of how things are done in the field, but not put the production together behind the curtain.
Oh yeah, without a doubt. When there's friction on a project site between two coworkers, it's typically because each of them think that a certain outcome is shared. Right. And that's why it's very important to make sure outcomes are separated and everybody's really clear on what's expected of them. You got to put egos to the side. You got to work like a team. The PM needs to respect that the super, and most supers want to be a super, and that's it. They don't want to, elevate more and drop back into the office. The only time I really see a lot of supers want to be elevated into a more controlled environment like the office is when they're doing a lot of traveling and they got family and they got kids and they're just at the point of their careers where they just, they want a more controlled environment as well. But these are the conversations that many owners just aren't having with their people. That's the problem. And I'm going to be a bit biased. This is the main reason why they bring in consultants.
Well, that brings us to a question that is in our audience right now, and they're saying that my issue is having the trust to give those tasks to other people, and I think that's something that a lot of us struggle with is that trust. And when you're saying that if you know what the outcomes are and you know what you're accountable for and you know when it's due, then there really doesn't have to be trust in that situation. We would like it, but in the moment, it really is just about making sure that you meet those parameters or those concepts that you've put together for your team.
Yeah, when a leader says I don't trust my people, I typically start with the first couple of questions about asking about them and who they are as an individual themselves. I mean, typically when people don't have that trust, they've just been burnt enough. But is it because of anything that we can change with you? Is there a growth opportunity within you that we can change first? Because it does start with you if you are the person who's delegating those tasks. Then from there, we transition to, okay, well, what tasks are you delegating? How are you doing it? And then how are you following through that these people are mentored properly and trained properly, right? It's a very old school. It's the way I was taught was they give you a little bit of what they want from you and then they expect for you to run from it. And luckily for me, I was always the type of person that if you gave me task A, I was able to figure out B, C, D, and E, and that was just, that's me, but that's not a lot of other people as well. And that's okay. It's just, some people understand the logic of construction differently than others as well,
Yeah. Yeah, so processes, systems, and structure and data are all going to be really important in becoming a successful construction company. We've talked a lot about how an executive professional is going to be managing their company and getting it ready for scale by being able to have the right org chart and having the right people in place. But before we wrap up, is there any suggestion that you would give someone who's looking at wanting to climb that corporate ladder and be one of those C-suite positions? Because I know a lot of times what happens in construction is somebody gets really good at the position that they're in, and then often they're passed over for getting promoted into another position because they're too important in the position that they're serving for the company. So how does an employee really align what they want to do and be in their life with the success of the company, while also having the executive professional recognize that people like to grow, people like competition, people want to be able to move up in the company? How do you work that fine line?
Well, when you go and go through an interview process, make sure that this particular company has the growth path that you're looking for, and that's going to change every couple of years, as it did for me as well. Make sure your supervisors know that you are looking to grow as well, and if they're good leaders, they're going to give you that opportunity. Right. And honestly, if the company is not getting that information from you without you even having to tell them, they might not be the right company to be working for as well, because they're just too consumed with other stuff that is not, they're not putting priority with their people as well. Another thing too is, especially when you're just starting out, is don't go to your boss with problems. Go to your boss with a problem and 1 to 2 solutions, which allows you to earn a lot of respect. That's what I did. And I started running jobs 1, 2, 3. I started running jobs really early in my 20s. And that's the reason why is I built their trust right away. Your boss has you on the job. Your supervisor has you there to deal with problems, because if they're dealing with all the problems, then they don't need you there, and understand that. Give it your all. Stay off your phone. Stay off of social media every single day. Give it your all, and stay focused on your job every single day, and ask for those promotions, because look, they're probably not just going to give it to you. Ask for it. Okay, show up and say, hey, I did this as a field engineer. Now I want to be an assistant super. I want to be a super. I want to be an assistant PM, and ask for those positions, and knock it out of the park. And then again, keep coming up with solutions. You got to keep just thinking and processing. This business requires a sense of urgency. You got to have a sense of urgency. Stop thinking that everything's going to get taken care of tomorrow, because tomorrow you're going to have another whole list of problems. Okay, I'm not saying stay working until 8 o'clock at night, but have that sense of urgency. Sorry, go ahead, Corey.
Well, I just think that, sometimes those of us that are a little seasoned, we get the short end of the deal of people thinking that, we're not going to change. We're always doing everything the same way. But yet there's value in some of those old ways. And one of them is get her done. It don't matter how. You just need to jump in and get her done. And when you start looking at the resilience of some of our older workforce that are getting ready to, go into retirement, I think this is a huge opportunity for companies to try to identify ways to capture the quality of the knowledge of that person and bring them back in mentorship opportunities or what have you with your companies. But I love what you're doing, Jerry. I really appreciate it. I'm sure there's some business owners out there who love what you're doing, and some others that are going to be interested in reaching out to you. How can they best connect with you in order to find out more information about what you offer?
Well, for one, if you're watching me on LinkedIn right now, connect with me on LinkedIn and send me a message. You can email me directly. It's Jerry with a J, JERRY at pro-accel.com. You can go on my website, pro-accel.com. Follow me on Instagram. I'm all over the place. So any of those outlets will be great.
And so before we end, let's just finish up with this last question. What are 3 points that you would give someone to help them prevent from ever being in a position of needing to hire you?
Oh boy. Well, on the business side of the equation or on the career path in construction side? Obviously it's the business side. 'Cause I deal with the business. Sorry. For one, it's know to take a step back and know what you achieved that previous year or that current year, and know what you're going to need for the next year, and actually build out a plan. Two is understand that the people that you are hiring are your future, and you need to nurture those relationships properly. And there's so many different ways you could do that. And three is just respecting your respecting your time, and just knowing that you need to take a breather a little bit and stop becoming so overwhelmed, because when you're overwhelmed during the day, you're just too anxious and you're too stressed out to actually take care of anything else that's required to build your company and grow it to the next level.
Well, easier said than done. So I think the best thing would be just to give you a call and ask you to come in to the office and help clean things up. So thank you so much again. I sincerely appreciate our friendship and the knowledge that you've shared with me in our struggle and travels together of building our own companies. And I just want to remind anyone that we're going to be starting our next Construction Management Essentials the first part of November. So if you're interested in a 12-week program that teaches you everything about construction management and becoming a construction manager, then please reach out to me. Otherwise, thank you again so much, Jerry, for being here. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me on. I really do.
All right.